The Lil Miss murder is the name given to the murder case of Lisa Marie Kimmel. The 18-year-old young American woman whose vanishing and subsequent death shocked communities across several states. She disappeared while traveling from Denver, Colorado, to her family's home in Billings, Montana. The case is known by that nickname because of her vehicle, a black Honda CRX with a personalized license plate reading Lil Miss. A small detail that became a crucial identifier as people searched for her. Lisa Marie Kimmel was born on July 18, 1969. She was raised in Billings, Montana, as the eldest of 3 daughters to Sheila and Ronald Kimmel. After high school graduation, she moved to Denver, Colorado, where she worked as a manager at an Arby's restaurant. The job was near Aurora, which placed her in the growing urban sprawl outside Denver. Though she lived in Denver during the week, Lisa regularly traveled back and forth between Denver and Billings, maintaining strong ties with her family. A distance of approximately 893 kilometers. Her mother, Sheila, also worked with Arby's in a regional manager role. During those years, Lisa's life was a balance between responsibilities in Colorado and the pull of home in Montana. As Lisa's journey unfolds, remember, justice delayed is still justice owed. The Lil Miss case isn't just about a crime, it's about a young woman whose life was stolen too soon. By staying with this story, you're helping keep Lisa Marie Kimmel's memory alive, making sure her name never fades into silence. Every like, every comment, every subscribe helps keep her story from fading. On March 25, 1988, Lisa left Denver with plans to stop in Cody, Wyoming, to see her boyfriend, and eventually make her way to Billings, Montana. Witnesses put her in Douglas, Wyoming, a stop for dinner and fuel, and later in the Casper area. One strong confirmed sighting involves a Wyoming Highway Patrol officer pulling her over for speeding at night. When the officer tried to assist her in paying the fine, the payment device did not work with her debit card, and she was allowed to mail in a check later. That encounter was significant because it was one of the last definite verifications that Lisa was still traveling until that point. After that, there were some unconfirmed sightings. People said they saw the Honda with Lil Miss on the plate, sometimes even believed Lisa was driving it. Some of these reports came in the hours and days after she was believed to have died. That personalized plate, Lil Miss, captured public attention immediately. Because it was distinct and memorable, law enforcement and media made it central in appeals to the public. Flyers, news reports, and public bulletins asked people to watch for the small black Honda CRX with the Lil Miss plate, hoping that someone, somewhere, would notice. Its uniqueness meant 2 things: it could help someone remember a sighting, and it could make spotting the car easier among thousands of others on highways and in towns. But it also created complications. Many reports came flooding in of someone seeing the car after the time that investigators believe Lisa had already been murdered. These later sightings muddy the timeline and raised tough questions about reliability of some witness statements. 8 days after her disappearance, on April 2, 1988, Lisa's body was found floating in the North Platte River near Casper, Wyoming, by fishermen. An autopsy revealed serious and tragic injuries. She had been bound, beaten, and sexually assaulted. She sustained multiple stab wounds in her chest and abdomen and had been hit on the head. That head injury would have been fatal even without the other wounds. Blood matching Lisa's was discovered on an old, seldom used bridge nearby, known in reports as the Old Government Bridge. That bridge became a focal point for investigators trying to reconstruct where she might have been killed, or at least where part of the crime occurred. After the official estimated time of death, dozens of people reported seeing either Lisa, or a car matching her description with the Lil Miss plate, in several towns and even different states. For example, in Casper, Wyoming, someone claimed to see the car parked or driving through. In Buffalo, Wyoming, Donna Kirkpatrick, wife of a county sheriff, reported seeing the vehicle and being certain of the Lil Miss plate. Another credible claim came from a witness in Casper who said the driver was a blonde woman wearing a yellow sweater. These reports raised major questions. Was Lisa already dead by the time these sightings occurred? Or was someone else driving her car to mislead or to cover tracks? Investigators considered many possibilities, including that people misidentified cars, that multiple people might have seen the wrong person, or that rumors had propagated. But none of those sightings yielded definitive proof. The car wasn't just a means of travel. For Lisa's family and for investigators, it was a symbol of identity, of hope, and of potential closure. It represented what was known, the car's make and model, its color, and the unique plate made it a kind of signature. If one could locate the vehicle, it might provide forensic evidence, fingerprints, blood, hair, or other clues. Even the location of the car could help determine what had happened in Lisa's final hours. Public interest was strongly tied to the car. Media stories often led with, "Have you seen the black Honda CRX with Montana license plate, Lil Miss?" The personalized plate made it easier for people to remember, easier to describe. It was distinctive in a way that generic plates are not. So many tips and eyewitness reports revolved around that detail. On the afternoon of March 25, 1988, 18-year-old Lisa Marie Kimmel packed her small Honda CRX. The one with the unmistakable personalized plate Lil Miss, and began the long drive north. She had just left Denver, where she had been working and living, heading back to her parents' home in Billings, Montana. It wasn't unusual for her to make that trip. Lisa enjoyed driving, and her compact car with its little flair of personality seemed almost an extension of her vibrant and ambitious character. Her mother, Sheila, had flown out of Denver the day before, catching a flight to Billings ahead of her daughter. Sheila was scheduled for a skiing trip and had trusted that Lisa would follow the next day, enjoying the drive and making her customary stops along the way. Lisa's journey was supposed to be straightforward, Denver to Billings, with one important detour in Cody, Wyoming, where she planned to pick up her boyfriend, Ed. The couple had made their plans in advance, and Ed was waiting for her eagerly. For the first part of the drive, all seemed perfectly normal. But as Lisa's car traced the long, lonely highways of Wyoming, her path became more traceable through official records rather than family recollections. The Wyoming Highway Patrol recorded a stop just outside Casper, Wyoming. At 9:06 p.m. Lisa had been pulled over for speeding near Douglas. Accounts suggest she remained polite and cooperative with the officer. Though young, Lisa was responsible, and a speeding ticket wasn't something she would panic about, it was simply a matter to deal with. What happened next is one of the haunting final certainties of her life. After issuing the ticket, the officer followed Lisa to a nearby ATM so she could attempt to withdraw the money to pay the fine. But when Lisa tried her card, she discovered the machine wasn't compatible with her bank. The officer, perhaps sensing her concern, agreed to let her mail a check to the department once she reached Billings. This small detail, the kindness extended, the problem left unresolved, would be the last confirmed encounter anyone had with Lisa alive. There were whispers of another sighting not long after. At approximately 10 p.m., a woman resembling Lisa was reportedly seen inside a grocery store in Casper. Though unconfirmed, the sighting placed her in the area a short time after her stop with the officer. Whether it was truly Lisa, or someone else who bore a resemblance, has never been definitively proven. But for investigators and her family, it became one of those fragments of hope, a fleeting image of her moving through the world in those final hours. When Lisa failed to arrive in Cody to pick up Ed, alarm bells rang quickly. Ed had been waiting, expecting the familiar Honda with its Lil Miss plate to roll into view, but it never came. By March 26, the day after she left Denver, her family realized something was wrong. Lisa wasn't the type to vanish without explanation, nor was she careless about commitments. When Ed called the Kimmel home in Billings to say Lisa had not arrived, her parents immediately feared the worst. Lisa's family reported her missing the same day. For Sheila and the rest of the family, panic set in quickly. Lisa was young, responsible, and deeply connected to her loved ones. She wouldn't have disappeared willingly. The thought of her stranded on some lonely stretch of Wyoming highway, out of gas or in trouble, was terrifying enough. The alternative, that something darker had happened, was almost too painful to consider, but it lingered in their minds from the start. The early days of Lisa's disappearance were filled with frantic calls, sleepless nights, and desperate hope. The personalized plate on her car gave investigators and family members a focal point for their search. Lil Miss wasn't just a nickname, it became a symbol on flyers, news reports, and pleas for help. If someone spotted that plate, they might find Lisa. The family clung to that thought. But as hours turned into days, and days into a week, Lisa's absence deepened into a haunting mystery. 8 days had passed since anyone had last seen Lisa Marie Kimmel alive. For her family, each day stretched into an eternity of unanswered questions, restless pacing, and desperate hope. For investigators, the search was growing colder with each sunrise. Flyers had been distributed. News reports had echoed the details across Wyoming and Montana. And yet, there was nothing. No sign of the young woman, no sighting of the little black Honda with its easily recognizable Lil Miss license plate. On the morning of April 2, 1988, the silence finally broke. It was a fisherman along the North Platte River near Casper, Wyoming, who noticed something drifting unnaturally in the water. The North Platte, wide and restless, cut through the landscape as it had for centuries, carrying logs, branches, and debris. But this object was different. At first glance, it seemed almost like a bundle of cloth caught in the current. As the fisherman edged closer, realization struck with chilling clarity. It wasn't debris. It was a human body. The man immediately called authorities, his voice tight and shaken as he explained what he had found. Within the hour, investigators and rescue crews descended upon the area. The body, carried downstream by the relentless pull of the current, was carefully retrieved from the water. There, under the pale Wyoming sky, the search for Lisa Kimmel came to a devastating end. The coroner's office quickly confirmed what many had feared. The remains belonged to Lisa. She had been missing for 8 agonizing days, and now the grim truth of her fate was laid bare. The autopsy painted a brutal picture of her final hours. Lisa had not died quickly, nor mercifully. The examination revealed she had been bound, restrained in a way that stripped her of freedom and left her at the mercy of her captor. She had been raped, her body bearing evidence of repeated sexual assault. She had also endured a beating, her injuries showed that someone had struck her, leaving marks that spoke to both cruelty and control. Forensic analysis suggested that Lisa had been held captive for as many as 6 days. 6 days where she was alive, terrified, and suffering in unknown confinement. This revelation was almost too much for her family to bear. It meant that while they had been distributing flyers, while they had been begging for leads, while they had been holding on to fragile hope, Lisa had still been alive somewhere, waiting, enduring, and unable to escape. The final sequence of her murder was no less horrifying. Evidence revealed that Lisa was eventually taken to a remote spot, the old government bridge, an isolated steel structure stretching across the river. There, her killer delivered the fatal violence. First, a crushing blow to the head with a blunt object, a strike that the medical examiner confirmed would have rendered her unconscious and, within minutes, would have ended her life. But her attacker did not stop there. Lisa was stabbed 6 times in her chest and abdomen, the knife wounds clear and deliberate. Whether those wounds came before or after the head trauma is debated, but the brutality spoke volumes. Once the assault was complete, her lifeless body was thrown into the dark waters of the river, left to drift until discovery. For investigators, the location of her murder was significant. The old government bridge was not a place someone stumbled upon accidentally. It was remote, known mainly to locals or those familiar with the landscape. To bring Lisa there suggested forethought and familiarity, a choice by someone who wanted privacy to commit an unthinkable act. When news of Lisa's discovery reached her family in Billings, devastation consumed them. Sheila, her mother, had been the most vocal throughout the search, constantly calling authorities, demanding updates, and refusing to let her daughter's case be forgotten. Now, she faced the unbearable reality that Lisa would never walk through the front door again. Grief spread across her family, her friends, her community. A young woman full of promise, known for her warmth and determination, was gone. Law enforcement, meanwhile, shifted from a search operation to a homicide investigation. The crime scene at the old government bridge was scoured for evidence. Detectives walked the structure inch by inch, looking for blood, fibers, anything that could help. They found signs consistent with the autopsy. The bridge had indeed been where Lisa met her end. But without witnesses or a suspect, the case felt like trying to hold water in open hands. One of the earliest and most crucial realizations among investigators was that Lisa's missing car, the black 1988 Honda CRX, was more than just a vehicle. It was the key. With its distinctive plate reading Lil Miss, the car was instantly recognizable. If someone had seen it, they could potentially place the killer. If the car could be found, it might contain fingerprints, fibers, or biological evidence tying the murderer to the crime. Within weeks of Lisa's death, the case was profiled on the national television program Unsolved Mysteries. The broadcast detailed Lisa's disappearance, the discovery of her body, and her distinctive vehicle. Reenactments dramatized her final known hours, while her family made heartfelt pleas for information. The coverage spread her story far beyond Wyoming and Montana, drawing attention from across the country. Years later, her murder was also featured on A&E's Cold Case Files. That program would highlight the long and grueling path investigators faced, how the lack of physical evidence and witnesses stalled the case, and how the search for her car became a focal point. The Lil Miss plate became almost legendary in true crime circles, a symbol of a case frozen in time, waiting for one missing piece. In the immediate aftermath of her body's discovery, however, all that existed was grief and frustration. Detectives interviewed residents near the old government bridge, hoping someone had seen or heard something unusual in the days Lisa vanished. They tracked down potential sightings of her Honda, logging each lead meticulously. They questioned known offenders in the area. And yet, nothing concrete emerged. The discovery of Lisa's body had answered one painful question: where she was. But it had raised dozens more. Who had taken her? Why had they kept her alive for days before murdering her? Where was her car? And most importantly, how could investigators catch someone who seemed to have vanished just as completely as Lisa once had? For her family, the knowledge that Lisa had suffered weighed heavily. The image of her in those final days, alone, restrained, terrified, would haunt them for years. And for the Casper community, the murder was a shockwave. A young woman traveling a familiar highway had been abducted and brutally killed. If it could happen to Lisa, it could happen to anyone. The old government bridge became more than a landmark, it became a crime scene frozen in memory. Locals whispered about it, parents warned their children, and fishermen who once frequented the river looked at the water differently. The bridge, with its steel beams and worn planks, now carried a weight of dread. Though the case would remain unsolved for years, investigators never forgot the importance of that missing Honda. They were convinced that the black CRX, buried or hidden somewhere, was the silent witness to everything that had happened. They just had to find it. By 2002, Lisa Marie Kimmel's murder had haunted Wyoming for nearly a decade and a half. The case, cold but never forgotten, lingered in the files of investigators who still carried the weight of her story. Her smiling face on missing person flyers, the infamous Lil Miss license plate, and the eerie isolation of the old government bridge had become symbols of loss and unanswered questions. But the truth was still buried, both literally and figuratively. In the summer of that year, a team of investigators combing through old evidence decided to revisit Lisa's rape kit, which had been carefully preserved since 1988. Advances in forensic science had transformed the landscape of criminal investigations. DNA profiling, once non-existent, had become one of law enforcement's most powerful tools. Where once there had been only fibers, fingerprints, and circumstantial trails, now there was the possibility of irrefutable biological proof. Technicians developed a DNA profile from the seminal evidence collected during Lisa's autopsy. That profile was uploaded into CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, a national database designed to match crime scene samples against those of known offenders. The result was swift, shocking, and definitive. The DNA belonged to Dale Wayne Eaton, a 57-year-old man from Monetta, Wyoming. At the time of the match, Eaton wasn't free. He was serving time in a federal prison in Englewood, Colorado, on an unrelated weapons charge. But his DNA had been placed in Cody's years earlier, back in 1997, after an astonishing and violent encounter that hinted at the darkness he carried within him. In 1997, the Breeden family had been driving through Wyoming when their car broke down. Stranded on the roadside, they thought they had caught a break when a man stopped to offer assistance. That man was Dale Eaton. At first, he presented himself as a good Samaritan. But the situation twisted quickly into something nightmarish. Eaton pulled a weapon, holding the family hostage at gunpoint. The family endured hours of terror before managing to escape. Eaton was later arrested for the crime, but even then, he refused to go quietly. He escaped custody and fled into the Shoshone National Forest, vanishing among the pines and mountains. His freedom didn't last long. Authorities tracked him down, and when he was captured, he was found in possession of a firearm. That detail, possession of a weapon during his escape, escalated his case to the federal level. He was sentenced to time in federal prison, where he was compelled to provide a DNA sample. That simple procedure, routine at the time, would prove to be the key to unraveling the Lil Miss murder years later. Once investigators had Eaton's name, they began reconstructing his life in 1988. They spoke with neighbors, combed through records, and tried to determine whether he had any connection to Lisa. What they learned was chilling. Eaton had lived on a rural property in Monetta, Wyoming, about 75 miles from Casper. His neighbors recalled something peculiar from years earlier. They had seen him digging a large hole on his land. At the time, it had seemed odd but harmless, a man working on his property. But with Lisa's murder now tied to him through DNA, that memory took on a sinister significance. Investigators obtained a warrant and, in the summer of 2002, began excavating Eaton's property. The digging soon revealed something extraordinary. Beneath the dirt, perfectly preserved by time and isolation, was Lisa's missing Honda CRX. The small black car, buried for over a decade, still bore the distinctive Lil Miss license plate that had once made it so memorable on the open road. The recovery of the vehicle was more than evidence, it was symbolic. The car had been the centerpiece of the search in 1988, the beacon investigators hoped would lead them to Lisa. For years, it had been hidden in the earth, as if Eaton had tried to erase both the car and the young woman's life it represented. Now, unearthed, it became the smoking gun in a case that had cried out for justice for 14 years. With the DNA evidence and the recovered vehicle, prosecutors had a solid case. Eaton was charged with 8 crimes related to Lisa's abduction and murder: first-degree premeditated murder, aggravated kidnapping, aggravated robbery, first-degree sexual assault, and second-degree sexual assault, among others. As the trial loomed, investigators continued to gather testimony. One particularly important voice came from Joseph Francis Dax, a fellow inmate who claimed Eaton had confessed to him. According to Dax, Eaton told the story in chilling detail. Lisa had offered him a ride, showing the kindness she was known for. During the drive, he made sexual advances. When she rejected him, she pulled over to let him out. Instead of accepting her refusal, Eaton escalated the situation, turning what might have been an awkward encounter into a nightmare. He kidnapped Lisa, holding her against her will. What followed was the sequence investigators already knew too well: sexual assault, captivity, and finally, her murder at the old government bridge. The prosecution painted Eaton as a predator, a man who had preyed upon a generous young woman who only wanted to help. The defense, of course, sought to raise doubts, but the combination of DNA, physical evidence, witness testimony, and Eaton's own violent history was damning. On March 20, 2004, the jury delivered its verdict. Eaton was found guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced him to death, making him the only inmate on Wyoming's death row at the time. The sentence was a moment of relief for Lisa's family, who had waited so long to see justice. But the legal system is rarely swift, and death penalty cases are often mired in appeals. Eaton's defense team challenged the conviction repeatedly. He appealed to higher courts, but time and again, the ruling stood. His death sentence remained. In December 2009, with his execution scheduled for February 2010, Eaton received a stay of execution. For Lisa's family, it was another cruel delay in a saga that had already spanned decades. In 2014, the stay was overturned, reigniting the possibility that the state might carry out the sentence. But as the years passed, momentum shifted. By 2021, Wyoming, like many states, faced increasing legal and ethical scrutiny over the death penalty. Prosecutors announced they would no longer pursue execution. In September of that year, the state dropped its request for reinstatement of Eaton's death sentence. His punishment was commuted to life imprisonment, where he would spend the rest of his days behind bars. For the Kimmel family, it was bittersweet. Justice had been served in the form of a conviction, but the finality of execution, the sense of ultimate closure, was denied. Eaton lived on, even as Lisa's life had been brutally cut short at 18. Finally, on March 25, 2022, almost 34 years after Lisa's murder, justice was redefined. Eaton was sentenced to life in prison without parole, along with additional decades for kidnapping and robbery. The death penalty was gone, but Eaton would never walk free again. Following Dale Wayne Eaton's conviction, the Kimmel family pursued justice in a way that went beyond the criminal courts. They filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit against Eaton, seeking accountability not only in the name of their daughter but also to make a statement about the devastation he had caused. The civil proceedings were lengthy, but unlike the criminal trial, where punishment was directed at Eaton himself, the civil case centered on restitution, damages, and acknowledgement of the harm inflicted on Lisa's loved ones. In 2004, the courts awarded Eaton's property to the Kimmel family. The land, situated on a rural Wyoming lot, included an old trailer and several outbuildings that had become infamous in the years following Eaton's arrest. Investigators had combed through this property in the late 1990s, uncovering critical evidence that tied him to Lisa Kimmel's abduction and murder. For the Kimmel family, the property symbolized the place where their daughter's final hours had likely been spent, and it became a grim monument to her suffering. Rather than allowing the land to stand as a reminder of Eaton's cruelty, the Kimmels made a profound decision. They arranged for the structures to be demolished and burned, an act that carried deep symbolic weight. On July 18, 2005, what would have been Lisa Kimmel's 36th birthday, family, friends, and community members gathered as the buildings were set ablaze. The fire consumed not only the weathered wood and metal but also the lingering darkness the place had come to represent. For the Kimmels, the act was more than closure, it was reclamation. By erasing the physical reminders of Eaton's crime, they transformed the land from a site of horror into a symbol of Lisa's enduring presence. The timing of the burning, on her birthday, was intentional, a way of honoring her life rather than dwelling solely on her death. The lawsuit and the destruction of Eaton's property sent a wider message as well. It showed that the family would not allow the killer's legacy to overshadow Lisa's memory. Even decades after her murder, their pursuit of justice demonstrated a steadfast resilience, a refusal to let her story end in violence alone. By the time Eaton was formally removed from death row, Lisa's story had already left an indelible mark on American true crime history. Her case appeared on Unsolved Mysteries, Cold Case Files, and countless documentaries, always framed by the haunting image of the black Honda CRX with Lil Miss on the plate. To investigators, the case underscored the power of DNA evidence, proving that time did not always erase justice. For Lisa's family, it was a reminder of resilience. Their persistence had ensured her story was never lost in the shuffle of cold cases. And to Wyoming, it was a sobering tale of violence hidden in plain sight, a lesson that monsters could live quietly among neighbors, mowing lawns and digging holes, all while carrying secrets too dark to imagine. As Lisa's case closes, remember, justice delayed is never justice denied. Her life cannot vanish into silence. By subscribing, sharing, and speaking her name, you're refusing to let her legacy die. If you turn away, she's forgotten. Carry her story forward. Keep Lil Miss alive, because silence is complicity.